The Florida humidity clung to my tailored blazer as I stepped through the automatic doors of Orlando International Airport. 3 days of intense negotiations had finally paid off, and the Meridian Tech contract was mine. Worth 6 figures to my consultancy firm, this deal would secure our expansion plans for the next 2 years. My heels clicked against the polished terminal floor as I navigated through the evening rush. The overhead announcements blurred into white noise, while I mentally catalogued everything that needed handling once I returned to New York. Richard would be proud when he heard the numbers. The familiar weight of my laptop bag reminded me of the presentation files still warm from victory. After building heart solutions from nothing 5 years ago, moments like these made every sleepless night worthwhile. The departure board showed my 8:30 p.m. flight to LaGuardia on time as I approached the Delta check-in counter. Maria, according to her name tag, greeted me with a professional smile that quickly faded as she scanned my confirmation number. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with increasing urgency. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hart, but I'm not finding your reservation in our system." Her brow furrowed as she double-checked the screen. "Let me call our booking department to see what might have happened." See. My stomach tightened as I watched her make the call. The Florida deal had been exhausting enough without travel complications. I needed to be home tonight, needed to collapse into my own bed and share this victory with Richard. "Mrs. Hart, your reservation was cancelled earlier today by someone with access to your booking." Maria's voice carried a note of confusion that matched my growing alarm. "The cancellation was made by a Richard Hart, listed as your emergency contact." My phone was already in my hand, Richard's number dialing automatically. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice strangely distant and measured. "Eleanor, I was wondering when you'd call." "Richard, what's going on? Why did you cancel my flight?" The words came out sharper than intended, drawing curious glances from other passengers. "Is everything okay? Is there an emergency?" "There's been a situation that requires your extended stay in Florida." Richard's tone remained maddeningly calm, professional almost. "I need you to stay there a few more days while I handle some urgent matters here in New York." The background noise on his end sounded wrong. Not the quiet of our Manhattan apartment, but something busier, more chaotic. "Richard, you're scaring me. What kind of situation? Is someone hurt? Is it your mother?" "Nothing like that, Eleanor. Just trust me on this. Book another hotel room, and I'll explain everything when the time is right." The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me standing in the middle of the terminal with my mouth open. The airport Marriott's lobby felt like a gilded prison as I checked in for an indefinite stay. The desk clerk's sympathy couldn't penetrate the fog of confusion settling over me like Florida's oppressive heat. My reflection in the elevator mirrors showed a successful businesswoman, but I felt like a lost child. Room 847 became my temporary sanctuary, complete with a view of planes taking off for destinations I couldn't reach. I loosened my pearl earrings and kicked off my heels, trying to make sense of what just happened. Richard had never been impulsive or secretive. The minibar called to me, but I needed clarity more than comfort. Something in Richard's voice had triggered every instinct I'd honed during years of reading difficult clients and hostile negotiations. My laptop glowed in the darkened hotel room as I combed through our joint bank account statements. The Meridian victory felt hollow now, overshadowed by a growing sense that my personal life was unraveling in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. The numbers on the screen told a story I wasn't prepared to read. A charge from Tiffany & Co. for $3,200 dated yesterday made my breath catch. I hadn't bought anything from Tiffany in months, and Richard typically consulted me on expensive purchases. My finger hovered over the transaction details, afraid of what I might discover. The hotel's air conditioning hummed while I stared at that single line item. In my 15 years of marriage, Richard had never made a significant purchase without discussing it first. The small scar above my left eyebrow began to throb, a stress response I developed during our struggling early years. My hands trembled as I accessed our credit card statements through the bank's mobile app. The Tiffany charge wasn't alone. flowers from a high-end Manhattan florist, dinner reservations at Le Bernardin for two, a weekend stay at the Plaza Hotel while I was supposedly visiting my sister in Boston last month. Each transaction felt like a small betrayal, puzzle pieces forming a picture I desperately didn't want to see. The emerald green eyes staring back at me from the bathroom mirror belonged to a stranger. How had I missed these signs? Richard's sudden business trips, his new cologne, the way he'd started putting his phone face down during dinner. The evidence had been there all along, hidden in plain sight behind my trust and his careful lies. At 2:17 a.m., I called Richard again. His groggy hello was immediately followed by sounds that made my heart race for all the wrong reasons. Hospital PA announcements echoed in the background, urgent and unmistakable. "Richard, where are you? Are you at a hospital?" "Eleanor, you woke me up. I'm at home in bed. You must be hearing the neighbor's television." But the lie felt clumsy, desperate. A nurse's voice clearly requested Dr. Patterson to labor and delivery, while Richard tried to cover his phone. "Don't lie to me, Richard. I can hear the hospital announcements. Who are you with?" My voice cracked on the last word, years of marriage and trust beginning to crumble like sand through my fingers. "I can't discuss this over the phone, Eleanor. Just stay in Florida for a few more days, please." The desperation in Richard's voice was new, frightening. This wasn't the confident man who'd swept me off my feet in graduate school, who'd supported my entrepreneurial dreams when everyone else called them foolish. The line went dead again, leaving me alone with the terrible certainty that my life was about to change forever. The gold wedding band on my finger suddenly felt heavy, foreign. 15 years of marriage, and I was discovering my husband was a stranger. I sat on the hotel room's stiff chair, still wearing yesterday's business clothes, watching planes disappear into the pre-dawn darkness. Each departing aircraft felt like another door closing, another escape route vanishing into the night. Dawn crept through the hotel curtains like an unwelcome visitor, illuminating the financial evidence scattered across my laptop screen. 3 hours of sleep had brought no peace, only the stark clarity that comes with accepting an unthinkable truth. My husband was hiding something catastrophic, and I was trapped 1,200 miles away from finding out what. Room service delivered coffee I couldn't taste and toast I couldn't swallow. The Meridian contract lay forgotten in my briefcase, while I focused on solving a different puzzle entirely. Professional success meant nothing when your personal life was collapsing in real time. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. The confident business owner had been replaced by someone vulnerable and lost, but beneath the hurt, something harder was taking shape. "Lisa, I need your help." My business partner's voice was instantly alert despite the early hour. Lisa Chen had been my anchor through every crisis Heart Solutions had weathered, and I needed her analytical mind more than ever. "Something's very wrong with Richard." "Eleanor, you're scaring me. What happened?" Lisa's concern traveled clearly through the phone connection. I could picture her in her pristine Manhattan office, already reaching for her notepad to organize whatever chaos I was about to unleash. "He canceled my flight home without telling me, and last night I caught him lying about being at a hospital. I think he's having an affair." Speaking the words aloud made them real, transformed suspicion into devastating possibility. "I know someone who can help." Lisa's voice carried the decisive tone that made her such an effective partner. "Jake Morrison used to be NYPD. Now he's a private investigator. He owes me a favor from when I helped his daughter with her business plan." The idea of hiring a private investigator felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. But the alternative was sitting in this hotel room, slowly going insane, while Richard continued his deception. "Can you contact him? I need to know what Richard's really doing." "Already dialing," Lisa replied. "Jake's based in Miami, so he can be in Orlando within 3 hours. Eleanor, whatever we find, you're not alone in this. Heart Solutions is as much mine as yours, and so are you." Jake Morrison looked exactly like central casting would order for a grizzled private investigator. His graying beard and sharp eyes belonged to someone who'd seen humanity's darker impulses up close. We met in the hotel lobby, where his presence somehow made everything feel more real and more terrifying.
Mrs. Hart, Lisa filled me in on the basics. His handshake was firm, reassuring. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've learned that people's instincts are usually right. If something feels wrong, it probably is. He spread photos across the small lobby table like tarot cards, revealing an unwanted future. These are from yesterday afternoon at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. Your husband was there for approximately 6 hours, accompanied by a blonde woman who appeared to be in labor. The photograph showed Richard's profile as he supported a young blonde woman walking slowly down a hospital corridor. Her hand rested on her obviously pregnant belly, while his arm encircled her shoulders with unmistakable tenderness. The intimacy in that simple gesture felt like a physical blow. Her name is Sarah Coleman, age 28, works as a marketing coordinator at Brennan & Associates. Jake's voice remained professional while my world crumbled. They've been seen together regularly for approximately 8 months. The baby was born at 3:47 this morning. I stared at the photograph until the figures blurred through my tears. The expensive watch Richard wore was the one I'd given him for his last birthday. The careful way he guided Sarah down the hall spoke of practice, of a relationship that had grown deep roots while I'd been building my business. The Tiffany purchase was an engagement ring, Jake continued, consulting his notes with the detached precision of someone delivering devastating news professionally. He proposed to Ms. Coleman last week at the same restaurant where you celebrated your anniversary 3 years ago. Each detail felt like another small death. Richard hadn't just betrayed our marriage, he'd systematically replaced it with something else entirely. The elaborate lies, the cancelled flight, keeping me stranded in Florida, while he welcomed his child with another woman. There's more, Mrs. Hart. I'm sorry. Jake's expression grew grimmer. He's been liquidating joint assets over the past 2 months. The money's been transferred to accounts bearing both his and Miss Coleman's names. My hands clenched into fists as the full scope of Richard's deception became clear. He hadn't just been unfaithful, he'd been systematically preparing to abandon our life together while keeping me completely in the dark. The cancelled flight was meant to keep me away during the most vulnerable moment of his transition. How much? My voice sounded foreign, harder than I'd ever heard it. The businesswoman who'd built a successful company from nothing was finally fighting back against the most important betrayal of her life. How much money has he stolen? Approximately $180,000 from various joint accounts and investments. Legally, since they were joint accounts, it's not technically theft. But morally, Jake's shrug spoke volumes about the cases he'd handled over the years. I want to go home. The words came out with crystalline clarity. I want to confront him while he's still at the hospital, still vulnerable, still thinking I'm safely trapped down here in Florida. The gold wedding band slipped easily off my finger after 15 years of marriage. Jake nodded approvingly. Lisa's already booked you on the next flight to LaGuardia. She'll meet you at the airport with whatever you need for the confrontation. Are you sure you're ready for this? Ready felt like the wrong word. Nothing could prepare someone for the systematic destruction of their life's most important relationship. But sitting in this hotel room while Richard celebrated his new family wasn't an option anymore. The flight back to New York stretched endlessly before me, but for the first time in 24 hours, I felt like I had some control. Lisa had arranged everything with military precision. A seat on the 2 p.m. flight, a car to take me directly to Mount Sinai, even a change of clothes waiting at LaGuardia. One more thing, Mrs. Hart. Jake handed me a manila envelope thick with photographs and documents. Everything you'll need for divorce proceedings. I work fast when someone's been this thoroughly betrayed. His smile was grim, but supportive. The hotel room that had been my prison for one terrible night suddenly felt like a launching pad. I was Eleanor Hart, successful business owner. survivor of countless professional battles. Richard had underestimated me completely, and he was about to learn the cost of that mistake. The taxi to Tampa International felt like a journey into battle. I clutched Jake's manila envelope against my chest, armor made of evidence and bitter truth. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Lisa had texted updates every few minutes. Flight confirmed, car service arranged. Jake's contact at the hospital will let you know Richard's exact location. You's got this, Elle. The businessman beside me in the terminal was celebrating some deal on his phone. Yesterday, I would have smiled at his enthusiasm. Today, success felt like a foreign concept. As the plane climbed through Florida's cloudless sky, I opened Jake's envelope for the first time. Each photograph was a small violence. Richard buying baby clothes. Richard painting a nursery. Richard being someone's devoted partner. The financial documents were worse than photographs. He'd emptied our vacation fund, liquidated the emergency savings we'd built over 15 years, transferred money meant for our future into accounts shared with Sarah Coleman. My wedding ring sat in my purse now. 15 years of promises, reduced to 3 grams of gold that felt impossibly heavy for something so small. Sarah Coleman's social media presence painted her as everything I wasn't. Where I was serious and professional, she posted silly videos and inspirational quotes. Where I built businesses, she collected experiences and adventures. Her pregnancy announcement from 6 months ago showed Richard's hands cradling her belly from behind. The caption read, "Sometimes life surprises you with exactly what you need." 47 likes, including one from Richard's mother. The betrayal had layers I was still discovering. This wasn't a momentary lapse or midlife crisis. This was a carefully constructed alternate life, complete with family approval and shared dreams. My phone buzzed with Lisa's military precision planning. She'd positioned herself like a general preparing for warfare, and I was her weapon of choice. Car service will take you directly to Mount Sinai. Jake's hospital contact confirms Richard's still there. Jake found Sarah's room number, 3rd floor, maternity ward. Security is minimal on weekends. You'll have approximately 30 minutes before visiting hours officially end, but that might be all you need. The flight attendant offered me peanuts and a beverage. Normal gestures from a normal world where husbands didn't systematically destroy marriages while their wives built businesses hundreds of miles away. LaGuardia's familiar skyline should have felt like coming home. Instead, it looked like enemy territory where nothing could be trusted anymore. The city lights below held secrets I'd been too naive to notice. Lisa waited at the gate with a garment bag and the kind of fierce expression that had made our business partnership so successful. Her hug was brief, businesslike, designed for action rather than comfort. "Change of clothes in here," she said, handing me the bag. "Something that shows you mean business but won't get you thrown out of the hospital. Jake's final report is in the side pocket." The airport bathroom became my war room. I changed from travel clothes into a black blazer and dark jeans. Professional, but not intimidating to hospital security. My reflection showed someone I barely recognized. Harder, more focused, dangerous in a way I'd never been. Jake's final report contained details that made my hands shake. Richard had been planning this transition for months. The cancel flight was meant to keep me away during Sarah's delivery, buying him time to establish his new reality. He'd underestimated me completely, assuming I'd sit helplessly in Florida while he rewrote our entire life story. The man who'd supposedly loved me for 15 years didn't know me at all. Lisa's hired car moved through Manhattan traffic with purpose. The driver briefed on our urgency, navigated shortcuts and aggressive lane changes like he was delivering medicine to a dying patient. In a way, he was. "You don't have to do this tonight," Lisa said, though her tone suggested she knew I did. "We could wait until tomorrow, plan this more carefully, get legal representation present." But tomorrow Richard would be home, back in our apartment, surrounded by familiar lies and comfortable deceptions. Tonight, he was vulnerable, caught between his old life and new one, unable to fully control the narrative. The hospital's maternity ward buzzed with different energy than the rest of the building. New life, hope, families beginning their journeys together. The irony felt like being stabbed with good intentions. Jake's contact, a security guard named Marcus, nodded as I approached the information desk. "Mrs. Hart, 3rd floor, room 314. Your husband's been there since this morning. Baby's healthy, 8 pounds, 2 ounces. The elevator ride lasted forever, and not nearly long enough. Each floor that passed gave me more time to lose my nerve, and brought me closer to confronting 15 years of lies." Room 314 sat at the end of a corridor, lined with sleeping new mothers and their partners. The sounds of fresh families settling into their expanded lives created a soundtrack of everything I thought I'd wanted. Through the partially open door, I could see Richard's profile as he held a bundle of blankets. His expression was softer than I'd seen in years, filled with wonder and protective tenderness directed at someone else's child. Sarah lay in the hospital bed, exhausted but glowing, watching Richard with a kind of love I remembered from our early years together. They looked like a real family, complete in ways Richard and I had never managed. I stood in that doorway for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years, watching my husband exist in a reality where I had never existed. His expensive watch caught the light as he traced his finger along the baby's cheek. Jake's photographs hadn't captured the intimacy of this moment. This wasn't just an affair or even a second relationship. This was Richard's real life, and I had been the side character he was finally ready to write out of the story. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Remember who you are. Remember what you've built. Remember that you deserve better than lies." "Hello, Richard." My voice cut through their private moment like a blade through silk. Richard's head snapped up, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and pure terror in the space of 2 heartbeats. Sarah's eyes went wide as she processed who I must be. The baby, oblivious to the drama unfolding around his arrival, continued sleeping peacefully in his father's suddenly trembling arms. The silence stretched between us, 15 years of marriage colliding with 8 months of betrayal in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and broken promises. "Eleanor." Richard's voice cracked on my name like he was seeing a ghost. "What are you doing here? How did you... Your flight was cancelled. You're supposed to be in Florida." "Yes, my flight was cancelled. By you. To keep me away from this." I gestured to the tableau before me. New father, new mother, new life built on the foundation of destroying mine. Sarah struggled to sit up straighter, instinctively protective of the child in Richard's arms. "Richard, who is this? You said your divorce was already finalized." "Divorce?" The word came out as a last that sounded nothing like me. "Sarah, I presume. I'm Eleanor Hart, Richard's wife of 15 years. The divorce he mentioned? That's news to me." Richard's face had gone pale, but I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to manage this situation. The man who'd been so tender with the baby moments before was now the strategic businessman I'd married. "Eleanor, you don't understand the situation. Sarah and I, this isn't how I wanted you to find out. I was going to explain everything when you got back from Florida." "Explain what exactly?" "How you've been building a life with another woman while I built our business. How you emptied our accounts to fund your new family. How you kept me stranded in Florida while you welcomed your son." Sarah's sharp intake of breath told me she hadn't known about the money. Richard's jaw tightened as he realized how much I'd discovered in 24 hours of investigation. "You hired someone to spy on me." It wasn't a question. Richard's voice carried the indignation of someone who'd been caught, rather than someone who'd been wronged. "I hired someone to find the truth. You were too cowardly to tell me yourself." I stepped fully into the room now, no longer hiding in doorways or accepting vague explanations about emergencies. "Sarah, did you know your boyfriend is married? Did you know he's been financing your relationship with money stolen from joint accounts? Did you know he cancelled my flight to keep me away from your delivery?" Sarah's eyes darted between Richard and me, confusion and hurt replacing the glow of new motherhood. The man holding her baby was suddenly a stranger with a more complicated history than she'd been told. "It's not stealing when it's legally mine too," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. "And Sarah knew about you, Eleanor. She knew our marriage had been over for years, that we were just going through the motions." Going through the motions? The accusation hit like a physical blow. I was building our future while you were building another life. Every late night, every business trip, every sacrifice I made was for us. The baby stirred in Richard's arms, sensing the tension in the room. Sarah reached for her child instinctively, but Richard seemed reluctant to let go of his shield. "Richard, you told me you were separated. You said the divorce was almost final, that she knew about us." Sarah's voice was stronger now, the initial shock giving way to her own sense of betrayal. "You said she didn't want children, that she chose her career over family. You said she wouldn't care about us being together because she'd already moved on emotionally." I watched Sarah piece together the same lies Richard had been feeding both of us, just in different flavors. She was learning what I'd discovered, that Richard was capable of extraordinary deception when it served his purposes. "I never said I didn't want children," I told Sarah directly, ignoring Richard's presence between us. "We've been trying for 3 years. Richard suggested we wait until the business was more stable, until we could afford the best schools, until we had the perfect life set up." Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to horror as she realized the scope of Richard's lies. The man she'd fallen in love with, who promised her honesty and devotion, had been manipulating both of us with practiced ease. Richard opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah cut him off. "Give me my son." Her voice carried new authority, the voice of a mother protecting her child from a suddenly untrustworthy father. Richard hesitated before placing the infant in Sarah's arms, and I saw something flicker across his face. Genuine love for this child. Perhaps the only honest emotion he'd shown since I'd walked into the room. "His name is James," Sarah said quietly, looking down at the baby with fierce protectiveness. "James Coleman, not James Hart. I never planned to take your name, Richard. Now I understand why." The baby, James, opened his eyes briefly, dark blue like his father's, unaware that his first day of life was also the day his parents' relationship began to crumble under the weight of exposed lies. Looking at Sarah holding her son, I felt something I hadn't expected: sympathy. She wasn't the villain in this story. She was another victim of Richard's elaborate deceptions, a woman who'd believed the lies he told as carefully as I had. "How long have you been together?" I asked her, keeping my voice gentle despite the circumstances. Sarah deserved answers as much as I did, perhaps more, with a newborn depending on her choices. "At 8 months, she whispered. "He said he'd been separated for over a year, that the divorce was just a formality. I never would have, if I'd known you were still together, still trying to make it work." 8 months. I turned to Richard, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the hospital walls. 8 months of telling her we were separated, while telling me you were working late. 8 months of lies to both of us. "Eleanor, it's complicated. Our marriage hasn't been real for years. We've been like business partners, not husband and wife. What Sarah and I have is different. It's built on lies," I interrupted. "Just like our marriage apparently was, at least from your perspective." "Tell me, Richard, when exactly did you decide our partnership wasn't enough? When did you start shopping for a replacement?" "And the money?" I pulled out Jake's financial records, letting them flutter to the floor between us, like fallen leaves. "The $180,000 you transferred to joint accounts with Sarah. Was that part of the complicated situation too?" Sarah's sharp intake of breath told me she was seeing those numbers for the first time. Richard's face flushed red as he realized his financial betrayal was news to his pregnant girlfriend, adding another layer to his web of deceptions. "You told me that money was from your savings, from investments you'd made before we met," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. You said you've been planning for this baby, preparing to be a father. He was preparing, I said, looking directly at Richard, by stealing from the woman who'd spent 15 years building a life with him. Every dollar you spent on Sarah came from accounts I helped fill, from a business I built while you played house with someone else. Richard's composure finally cracked completely. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was going to tell you both, explain everything properly. The baby came early. Everything got complicated. Everything got complicated the moment you decided to cheat rather than communicate. My voice carried 15 years of disappointment and betrayal, but also a clarity I hadn't possessed 24 hours earlier. Sarah looked up from her son with new determination. Richard, I think you should leave. I need time to think about everything I've learned tonight, and I don't want you here while I process this. Sarah, please, don't let her poison what we have. What we built together is real, regardless of how it started. James needs his father. James needs an honest father, she replied firmly. And right now, I'm not sure that's what you are. I'm not sure either of us really knows who you are. I looked at Richard one last time, trying to find remnants of the man I'd married 15 years earlier. He seemed smaller now, diminished by the exposure of his deceptions, no longer the confident partner who'd stood beside me through early business struggles. I'll be filing for divorce Monday morning, I told him calmly. Jake documented everything we need. Don't come home tonight, Richard. Don't come home until you've figured out who you actually want to be. Sarah nodded approvingly, and I felt an unexpected moment of connection with this woman who'd inadvertently helped me discover the truth about my marriage. I turned toward the door without waiting for Richard's response. Behind me, I could hear Sarah murmuring to baby James, her voice soft and protective. Richard remained silent, probably calculating his next move, his next set of lies. The hospital corridor felt different as I walked away. The sounds of new families no longer mocked my situation. Instead, they reminded me that beginnings were possible at any age, under any circumstances. Lisa waited by the elevators, having positioned herself as my getaway driver and emotional support system. Her smile was proud and fierce when she saw me approaching alone. How do you feel? Lisa asked as we descended toward the lobby. Her question was genuine, not the reflexive courtesy people usually offered in difficult situations. Lighter, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. Angry and sad and betrayed, but also lighter. Like I've been carrying something heavy without realizing it, and I finally got to put it down. The elevator opened onto the lobby, where normal people were visiting normal patients with normal problems. We walked through them like ghosts from a more complicated world. Manhattan at midnight felt different than it had hours earlier. The lights were the same, the traffic patterns unchanged, but I moved through it all with new purpose. This city held my business, my friends, my actual life. Where do you want to go? Lisa asked as we settled into the hired car. Hotel? My place? We could drive around until you're ready to face whatever comes next. I considered the options, then realized there was only one choice that made sense. Home. I want to go home and start packing his things. Our apartment, my apartment, felt like a museum of lies when I walked through the front door. Every shared object, every photograph, every piece of furniture chosen together now seemed tainted by the knowledge of Richard's double life. Lisa helped me gather his belongings with efficient ruthlessness. Clothes went into suitcases, personal items into boxes, shared gifts into a pile for future decisions. We worked mostly in silence, the task speaking for itself. By dawn, Richard's physical presence had been erased from the space. The apartment felt larger, emptier, but also more honest. This was my home now, and it would be whatever I chose to make it. The morning light streaming through familiar windows felt foreign now, illuminating a space that belonged entirely to me. Coffee tasted different when brewed in solitude, stronger somehow, more intentional,
than the automatic routine of married mornings. Lisa had stayed the night, camping on my couch like a protective guardian. She emerged from the kitchen with 2 steaming mugs, her hair disheveled, but her expression alert and concerned. "Any regrets about last night?" she asked, settling beside me on the couch that no longer held Richard's familiar indentation. Her question wasn't judgment. It was genuine curiosity about my emotional state. "None," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I keep waiting for the regret to hit, for some wave of "what have I done" to crash over me, but it hasn't come. The apartment felt bigger without Richard's presence, like a held breath finally released. Every corner seemed to exhale with relief, no longer holding the tension of unspoken truths. "You look different," Lisa observed, studying my face with the careful attention of someone who'd known me for years. "More like the Eleanor from college, before you learned to make yourself smaller." My phone buzzed with the first of what would become a flood of logistics. Jake Morrison's text was characteristically brief. Divorce attorney recommendations attached, all vetted, all ruthless when necessary. I scrolled through the list of names, each accompanied by brief descriptions of their specialties. Financial complexity, high net worth cases, business asset protection, the vocabulary of unraveling a life. "Start with Rebecca Martinez," Lisa suggested, reading over my shoulder. "I've heard good things about her approach. Thorough, but not vindictive unless she needs to be." The law office felt deliberately calming, all muted colors and soft lighting designed to soothe clients in crisis. Rebecca Martinez was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Tell me everything," she said, opening a leather portfolio. "Start from the cancelled flight. Don't edit for embarrassment or pain. I need the complete picture to protect your interests effectively." The story spilled out differently this time, more clinical in the retelling. Facts and dates and dollar amounts. The skeleton of betrayal stripped of its emotional flesh for legal examination. "The business is entirely yours?" Rebecca asked, making notes in precise handwriting. "No marital funds used for startup costs? No contribution from Richard in terms of labor or investment?" I shook my head, grateful for my younger self's insistence on maintaining financial independence. The consultancy was mine, built with my expertise, my connections, my 15-hour days, and weekend sacrifices. "Good. That simplifies things considerably. What about the apartment?" She flipped to a new page, pen poised for the next layer of complexity. "Joint ownership, but I can prove I paid 70% of the down payment from premarital savings." The numbers came easily. I'd always been the one who managed our finances, tracked our investments. Rebecca nodded approvingly. "And the money he transferred to the mistress?" "Jake's documentation will be crucial there. We'll argue the reimbursement as dissipation of marital assets." The clinical language helped. Dissipation, asset division, spousal misconduct. Legal terms that wrapped Richard's betrayal in manageable categories instead of raw emotional wounds. "I'll file the papers today," Rebecca said, closing her portfolio with decisive efficiency. "New York is no fault, but the financial misconduct gives us leverage. He'll be served at his office tomorrow." The thought of Richard receiving divorce papers at work sent an unexpected thrill through me. Let him explain our interruption to his colleagues, his clients, his carefully constructed professional image. "How long does the process take?" I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. Some journeys felt more bearable without visible endpoints. The call came at 3 in the afternoon. Richard's voice was strained, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "Eleanor, we need to talk. The papers. This is all moving too fast." "It moved too fast when you cancelled my flight to be with your pregnant girlfriend," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Now it's moving at exactly the right speed." Lisa gave me a thumbs up from across the room, where she was pretending not to eavesdrop while aggressively organizing my bookshelf with unnecessary precision.
I know how this looks, but Sarah and the baby, they need me right now. She's alone, scared. I couldn't abandon her during the most vulnerable time of her life. The irony was breathtaking. What about my vulnerable time, Richard? What about 15 years of marriage that apparently meant nothing when weighed against her pretty face and your midlife crisis? His silence stretched long enough for me to wonder if he'd hung up. Then quietly, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant for you to find out this way." "You never meant for me to find out at all," I corrected. "There's a difference between protecting someone from pain and protecting yourself from consequences. You chose yourself every single time." The conversation felt like closing a book I'd been reading for 15 years, finally reaching the last page and understanding how poorly the story had been constructed from the beginning. "I loved you, Eleanor. I still love you. This thing with Sarah, it doesn't erase our history together." His words sounded hollow, rehearsed, like lines from a script he'd written. "Love isn't enough, Richard. Love without honesty is just elaborate pretending, and I'm done pretending." I ended the call without waiting for his response, my finger steady on the button. Lisa looked up from the book she'd been obsessively alphabetizing. "How do you feel?" she asked, the same question she'd posed in the hospital elevator, still genuine in its concern. "Tired," I admitted, but also relieved, like I've been holding my breath for months without realizing it, and I can finally exhale completely. The knock on my door came at 7 that evening, soft but insistent. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Richard's key no longer worked. I'd had the locks changed that afternoon. Through the peephole, I saw an older woman I didn't recognize, well-dressed but nervous, clutching a small purse with white-knuckled fingers. Her resemblance to Richard was unmistakable around the eyes. "Eleanor, I'm Margaret Hart, Richard's mother. I know we haven't spoken much over the years, but I was hoping we could talk." Margaret Hart had always been a distant figure in our marriage, Richard's mother, who lived in Connecticut and sent polite Christmas cards with impersonal messages. Seeing her in my doorway felt surreal. "I heard about the divorce papers," she said, accepting the cup of tea I offered with shaking hands. "Richard called me this afternoon, quite distraught about the whole situation." Lisa had retreated to the bedroom to give us privacy, but I could sense her hovering nearby, ready to intervene if this conversation took an unpleasant turn. "I need you to know that I don't approve of what my son has done," Margaret said, her voice firm, despite her obvious discomfort. "I raised him better than this." Her words surprised me. I'd expected her to defend Richard, to minimize his actions, or blame me somehow for not being enough to keep him faithful. "This woman, Sarah, she's not the first, Eleanor. I suspect you suspected as much, given how smart you are." Margaret's revelation hit like cold water. There was someone in Chicago 3 years ago, and before that, a woman from his graduate program. I kept hoping he'd outgrow this behavior, that marriage to you would settle him. The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. Richard's business trips, his late nights at the office, his sudden interest in fitness and new clothes, all of it now made horrible sense. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Margaret Hart was trying to give me ammunition, validation that this wasn't my failure. "Because you deserved better than what my son gave you," she said simply. "And because I want you to know that some of us in his family recognize your worth." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two women connected by disappointment in the same man. Her visit felt like an unexpected gift, validation from the most unlikely source. "I have something for you," Margaret said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents, financial records from Richard's trust fund. "I think your lawyer will find them interesting." After Margaret left, I called Rebecca Martinez's emergency line. The documents revealed a family trust worth nearly $500,000 that Richard had never mentioned during our marriage. This changes everything, Rebecca said, her voice energized by the discovery. If he's been hiding assets, we can argue for a much larger settlement. Your mother-in-law just handed us a winning hand. I spread the papers across my dining table, each page representing another layer of deception. How many other secrets had Richard kept from me during our 15 years together? Jake Morrison called an hour later with more discoveries from his investigation. Richard's been paying for Sarah's apartment for 8 months, plus her car lease, health insurance, and what looks like a monthly allowance. The financial betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. While I'd been carefully managing our household budget, Richard had been funding an entirely separate life with marital assets. There's more, Jake continued. Hotel receipts going back 2 years, gifts charged to your joint credit card, even what appears to be a piece of jewelry worth $12,000. The most unexpected call came near midnight. Sarah Coleman's voice was small, tired, filled with a vulnerability that made her sound younger than her 28 years. Eleanor, I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from Richard's phone while he was sleeping. The baby was crying softly in the background, a gentle reminder of the innocent life caught in this mess. I wanted to apologize for everything that's happened. I know that probably sounds hollow coming from me, but I need you to know I never intended for things to go this far. How far did you intend them to go? I asked, not unkindly. Anger towards Sarah felt pointless now. She'd been as deceived as I had, just in different ways. I thought he was separated, that his divorce was already in progress. He showed me papers, said you'd agreed to an amicable split. I would never have gotten involved otherwise. The baby's crying intensified, and I heard Sarah murmuring soft comfort. This young woman was dealing with new motherhood while learning that her relationship was built on lies. He told me you couldn't have children, that it was a source of sadness in your marriage, Sarah continued. When I got pregnant, he seemed so happy, so ready to be a father. Another lie to add to the collection. Richard and I had discussed children but decided to focus on our careers first. The decision had been mutual, postponed rather than abandoned. Sarah, I need you to know that almost everything he told you about me, about our marriage, was probably a lie. Just like what he told me about you. I'm starting to understand that, she said quietly. Since last night at the hospital, I've been going through things, asking questions. The timeline doesn't match up with what he told me. I found myself feeling protective of this young woman, who'd unknowingly become part of Richard's elaborate deception. She was another victim of his inability to tell the truth about anything. What will you do now? I asked, genuinely curious about how someone navigates single motherhood while processing the destruction of their relationship. Focus on James, she said simply. He didn't ask for any of this complexity. Richard can be part of his life if he learns how to be honest, but I won't expose my son to lies. Her strength surprised me. Despite being 8 years younger and dealing with the overwhelming demands of a newborn, Sarah had found clarity that took me 15 years to achieve. I hope you find happiness, Eleanor. Real happiness, not the pretend kind Richard specializes in. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me with an unexpected sense of closure. Richard appeared at my door the next morning, looking haggard and desperate. The locks had been changed, so he stood in the hallway, no longer able to enter the home we'd shared. We need to talk, he said, his usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like panic. This is all spiraling out of control. The lawyers, the financial investigations, we can work this out ourselves. I remained in the doorway, not inviting him in. This space was mine now, and he no longer had automatic access to my life or my attention. There's nothing left to work out, Richard. You made your choices over months and years. Now you get to live with the consequences. My voice was calm, steady, final. I'll give up, Sarah, come home, go to counseling, whatever it takes. 15 years has to count for something. His desperation was palpable, but it felt performative rather than genuine. 15 years does count for something. It counts as 15 years I'll never get back. 15 years I spent with someone who wasn't real. I stepped back, beginning to close the door. Eleanor, please. I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was confused about other things. Doesn't that matter at all? His final plea hung in the air between us. If you loved me, you would have told me about Sarah before she got pregnant. If you loved me, you wouldn't have stolen our money to fund your other life. Love isn't just a feeling, Richard. It's a choice you make every day. I closed the door firmly, the sound echoing through the hallway. From the other side, I could hear him standing there for several minutes before his footsteps finally retreated toward the elevator. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in October. Rebecca had negotiated a settlement that recovered most of the money Richard had spent on Sarah, plus compensation for the hidden trust fund assets. I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. The October air was crisp with promise, and Manhattan stretched before me like an open book, waiting for new stories. Lisa was waiting by the courthouse steps, holding a bottle of champagne despite the early hour. To new beginnings, she said, though we'd save the actual celebration for later. My business had flourished during the divorce proceedings, as if the energy I'd previously spent managing Richard's deceptions had been redirected into productive channels. 3 new major clients, 2 partnership opportunities, and a consulting contract that would take me to London next month. The apartment had been redecorated slowly, thoughtfully. New furniture that reflected my taste alone, artwork that made me smile, colors that spoke to who I was becoming rather than who I'd been. Some evenings I missed the companionship of marriage, but I never missed the constant vigilance required to love someone who couldn't tell the truth about anything important. Jake Morrison called with an update I hadn't expected. Richard and Sarah broke up last month. Apparently, she discovered he'd been seeing someone else even while she was pregnant. The information shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Some part of me had hoped Richard would at least be faithful to the woman he'd destroyed our marriage for. Sarah's doing well, by the way. Started her own business, some kind of online marketing thing. The baby's healthy and happy. Jake's voice carried approval for the young woman who'd chosen truth over comfort. A year after that cancelled flight changed everything. I found myself back in Orlando for another business trip. The same airport, the same airline, but this time I was traveling alone by choice rather than circumstance. The check-in attendant was different, but I remembered Maria, who'd unknowingly triggered the unraveling of my marriage, with her concerned expression and careful phone calls to verify my reservation status. As I boarded the plane, I reflected on how one moment of confusion at an airline counter had led to the complete reconstruction of my life. The flight back to New York was smooth, uneventful in the best possible way. I spent the time reviewing proposals for a new venture, a consultancy focused specifically on helping women navigate career transitions and business ownership. Several of my clients over the past year had been women rebuilding their lives after divorce, and I'd discovered an unexpected expertise in helping others find their professional footing during personal upheaval. The irony wasn't lost on me that Richard's betrayal had led me toward the most meaningful work of my career. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for something better than you'd ever imagined. As the plane descended toward LaGuardia, Manhattan sparkled in the distance like a promise kept. This city had been the backdrop for my marriage, but it was also where I built my business, cultivated friendships, and now, where I was creating a life entirely of my own choosing. The apartment would be warm and welcoming when I arrived, filled with objects that reflected my authentic taste and desires. No more compromises, no more careful navigation around someone else's secrets and lies. I had dinner plans with Lisa, a new book waiting on my nightstand, and a business that was thriving under my complete control. The life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal was smaller in some ways, but infinitely more honest. Looking back, I could see that the woman who'd stood confused at that Orlando check-in counter had been living in a beautiful prison, comfortable but constrained by someone else's deceptions. The cancelled flight had been an inadvertent key to freedom. Richard had done me the greatest favor of our marriage by being too careless to hide his betrayal effectively. His sloppiness had set me free to become someone I'd forgotten I could be. The plane touched down gently, and I gathered my belongings with the calm efficiency of someone who knew exactly where she was going and why. Walking through LaGuardia's familiar corridors, I felt the weight of transformation. Every step carried me further from the woman who'd once defined herself through marriage. The city lights beckoned with new possibilities. My phone buzzed with messages from potential clients. Word was spreading about my consultancy's success, particularly among women seeking guidance through major life transitions. Redemption had found its own momentum. The taxi ride through Queens felt different this time. I wasn't returning to a shared life of careful negotiations and hidden truths. I was coming home to myself. Lisa had prepared my favorite Thai takeout and chilled wine. We sat in my redecorated living room, surrounded by art that finally reflected my authentic taste, rather than diplomatic compromises. "You look different," she observed, studying my face in the lamplight. "Lighter somehow, like you're finally taking up all the space you're entitled to occupy." She was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't unconsciously making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's secrets and shame. Over dinner, I shared my vision for expanding the consultancy. The requests from women in transition had shown me an underserved market that needed both professional expertise and personal understanding. "I want to create something more than just business consulting," I explained. "A comprehensive program that addresses the practical and emotional challenges of rebuilding after betrayal." Lisa's eyes lit up with recognition. She'd watched me navigate this journey and understood the unique value of hard-won wisdom combined with professional skill. The next morning brought an email that made me pause. A feature writer from a prominent business magazine wanted to interview me about successful career pivots following personal upheaval. Apparently, word had spread through professional networks about my company's growth during my divorce proceedings. What I'd experienced as private survival had become public inspiration for others. The irony struck me. Richard's betrayal had inadvertently launched me toward the most meaningful work of my career. His destruction had become my foundation. The journalist's questions were thoughtful, focusing on the business aspects rather than salacious personal details. She wanted to explore how personal crises could catalyze professional innovation and growth. "Many women struggle to rebuild their careers after divorce," she wrote. "Your story suggests that disruption, however painful, can lead to unexpected opportunities for reinvention." I agreed to the interview, recognizing an opportunity to help other women see crisis as potential catalyst rather than just catastrophe. The magazine feature appeared 6 weeks later with a photo of me in my office, surrounded by the vision boards and client success stories that decorated my walls. The headline read, "From Betrayal to Business, How One Woman Turned Personal Devastation into Professional Innovation." It was more exposure than I'd ever sought, but the response was overwhelming. Within days, my email inbox filled with inquiries from women across the country, seeking guidance through their own transitions and business ventures. The London consulting contract proved even more successful than anticipated. European clients appreciated my direct approach and comprehensive methodology for navigating both business challenges and personal reconstruction. Standing in my temporary London office, overlooking the Thames, I reflected on how far I'd traveled from that confused woman at the Orlando airport check-in counter. The view from here was expansive, full of possibilities I'd never imagined when my world was constrained by someone else's lies and limitations. The London project led to invitations from consulting firms in Paris and Amsterdam. My reputation was spreading through networks I'd never thought to cultivate during my marriage. European businesswomen, it seemed, particularly valued advisors who understood how to rebuild both professionally and personally after major life disruptions. My experience had become expertise. Richard's betrayal had inadvertently given me a unique qualification, the ability to guide others through complete life reconstruction with both practical skills and emotional intelligence. Returning to New York after 2 months abroad, I barely recognized my former self. The woman who'd once carefully managed her husband's moods and secrets felt like a character from someone else's story. My apartment welcomed me with warmth and authenticity. Every object reflected choices made without compromise, conversations without hidden agendas, decisions based solely on my own values and desires. The business had grown beyond my wildest projections, with a waiting list of clients and partnership opportunities that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. 6 months later, I encountered Sarah Coleman at a networking event for female entrepreneurs. She approached me directly, her confidence surprising given our complicated history. "I wanted to thank you," she said simply. "Watching how you handled everything taught me what self-respect actually looks like in practice." Her honesty was disarming. The young woman who'd unknowingly participated in my marriage's destruction had learned her own lessons about truth and integrity. Sarah's online marketing business was thriving, and she'd become an advocate for transparency in both business and personal relationships. Motherhood had given her clarity about the kind of example she wanted to set. "Richard taught me what I never want to become," she confided. "Someone who lolls so habitually they can't distinguish truth from convenience anymore." We didn't become friends, but we found mutual respect, born from shared experience with someone who'd deceived us both. Jake Morrison's final report arrived by email with details I hadn't requested but found oddly satisfying. Richard's pattern of deception had continued, leading to professional difficulties and personal isolation. His law firm had discovered financial irregularities that resulted in suspension and professional censure. The reputation he'd spent years building had crumbled under scrutiny he'd previously avoided. The man who'd once seemed so successful had revealed himself as fundamentally unreliable, both personally and professionally. Truth had its own momentum once unleashed. 2 years after that cancelled flight, I celebrated my consultancy's expansion into a full-service firm with 12 employees and offices in 3 cities. The success felt earned rather than lucky, built on authentic skills rather than careful compromises. Every client represented someone who'd chosen growth over comfort, truth over convenience. My personal life had settled into rhythms that reflected my actual preferences rather than diplomatic negotiations. Solitude felt rich rather than lonely when it was chosen rather than imposed. The London expansion required a resident partner, and I found myself considering a temporary relocation. The opportunity represented professional growth and personal adventure in equal measure. Standing in my Manhattan office, looking out at the city that had witnessed both my marriage's destruction and my business's creation, I felt ready for whatever came next. The woman who'd once been blindsided by her husband's betrayal had become someone who approached uncertainty with confidence rather than fear. My calendar for the next 6 months included speaking engagements, media interviews, and consulting contracts that would have been unimaginable during my marriage. Success had its own momentum. The business had evolved beyond my original vision, encompassing not just consulting, but mentorship programs, workshops, and partnerships with organizations serving women in transition. Richard's betrayal had become the foundation for helping hundreds of other women rebuild their lives with greater authenticity and strength than they'd thought possible. That evening, I walked through Central Park as autumn painted the trees in brilliant colors. The path ahead was uncertain, but entirely my own to choose. No more careful navigation around someone else's lies. No more editing my authentic reactions to accommodate hidden agendas. No more making myself smaller to fit into someone else's deceptions. The life I'd built from betrayal's ashes was completely honest, thoroughly mine, and infinitely more satisfying than the beautiful prison I'd once called marriage. 5 years later, my memoir, Cancelled Flight, New Destination, became a bestseller, helping thousands of women recognize that betrayal's end can become freedom's beginning. The consultancy had grown into an international firm specializing in life and business reconstruction. What began as personal survival had evolved into a movement of authentic living. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best thing you'll ever build. Truth has its own power once you're brave enough to embrace it completely. The memoir's success brought unexpected challenges alongside recognition. Media interviews required revisiting painful memories, but each retelling seemed to diminish their power over my present reality. Letters arrived daily from women sharing their own stories of betrayal and transformation. Each one reinforced that personal devastation could become collective healing when shared with courage. Publishers across Europe requested translations, expanding the reach beyond my original English-speaking audience. The message of authentic reconstruction resonated across cultural boundaries in ways I'd never anticipated. Speaking engagements took me to cities I'd only dreamed of visiting during my marriage. Sydney, Tokyo, Berlin. Each audience brought fresh perspectives on rebuilding life after betrayal. The consulting firm's international branches flourished as demand grew. Women sought guidance not just on business reconstruction, but on the deeper work of reclaiming authentic identity. My team had grown to include psychologists, financial advisors, and legal experts. What began as survival consulting had evolved into comprehensive life reconstruction services with measurable success rates. Standing before a 1,000-person audience in London, I realized something profound. Richard's betrayal had become the catalyst for touching more lives than I'd ever imagined possible. The pain that once consumed my days had transformed into purpose that energized my weeks. Every client's success story validated the difficult journey from victim to victor. This wasn't about forgiving Richard or minimizing the damage he'd caused. This was about recognizing that my response to his betrayal defined my future more than his actions. 5 years later, I encountered the airline attendant Maria at JFK Airport. She recognized me immediately, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure and pride. "You remember that day in Orlando?" she asked. "I knew something special was going to come from such a difficult situation. You had this determination, even while devastated." We talked briefly about the transformation those years had brought. She'd followed my story through news articles, finding inspiration for her own challenges with divorce and single motherhood. Occasionally, mutual acquaintances shared updates about Richard's continuing difficulties, professional sanctions, failed relationships, financial struggles. The consequences of his deceptive patterns had compounded over time. I felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy. His choices had set both our lives on entirely different trajectories. Mine had led to purpose, authenticity, and meaningful success. The woman who'd once measured her days by his moods and needs barely recognized that version of herself. Growth had created distance from who I'd been. Dating hadn't been a priority during the business's rapid expansion, but authentic connections had developed naturally through professional and personal networks. Relationships built on truth felt completely different. There was no walking on eggshells, no careful monitoring of moods, no exhausting detective work searching for hidden agendas. Honesty had become my non-negotiable standard. Men who found my success intimidating revealed themselves quickly. Those who celebrated it demonstrated the character required for any future partnership. The filtering process was remarkably efficient. My 40th birthday celebration reflected the life I'd built. Genuine friends, meaningful work, authentic relationships, and absolute freedom to make choices aligned with my values. The guest list included clients who'd become friends, employees who felt like family, and international colleagues who'd flown in specifically for the occasion. Success had created community. No one mentioned Richard or the marriage that felt like ancient history. The evening focused entirely on future possibilities and present gratitude. That felt like true healing. The consulting firm's success enabled philanthropic initiatives I'd always dreamed of supporting. Scholarships for women starting over, grants for domestic violence survivors, mentorship programs for female entrepreneurs. Richard's betrayal had inadvertently funded causes he'd never supported during our marriage. His selfishness had become the foundation for helping thousands of women find their strength. The irony wasn't lost on me. His worst decision had enabled my best work. Sometimes life symmetry was more elegant than any planned revenge. University guest lectures brought opportunities to reach younger women before they encountered major betrayals. Prevention through education felt as important as recovery support. Students asked pointed questions about recognizing red flags, maintaining identity within relationships, and building financial independence. Their eagerness to learn from my experience was humbling. These conversations often revealed that betrayal patterns were generational. Breaking cycles required conscious effort, authentic communication, and unwillingness to accept deception as normal relationship dynamics. Sarah Coleman had built her marketing business into a significant enterprise, often referencing our brief conversation as pivotal to her own transformation. Motherhood and entrepreneurship suited her. We maintained professional respect without personal friendship. Our connection was too complicated for casual interaction, but we'd both learned valuable lessons from Richard's deception. Her success felt separate from our shared history. She'd chosen growth over victimhood, authenticity over convenience. That choice commanded respect, regardless of our complicated beginning. Television interviews became regular opportunities to share insights about transformation, authenticity, and the unexpected gifts hidden within life's worst betrayals. The message resonated widely. Producers often wanted dramatic confrontation details or revenge stories. I focused instead on the internal work of rebuilding identity and the professional success that followed emotional healing. The story's power lay not in Richard's betrayal, but in my response. That distinction was crucial for audiences seeking their own paths through similar devastation. Translation rights sold in 15 countries, each culture finding relevant wisdom within the universal experience of betrayal and reconstruction. Human resilience transcended geographical boundaries. Letters arrived from women in countries where divorce carried severe social consequences. My story offered hope that life reconstruction was possible, even within restrictive cultural contexts. The international response reinforced that authenticity was universally valued, even when achieving it required tremendous courage and sacrifice. Truth resonated across all cultures and languages. Industry awards acknowledged the consulting firm's innovative approach to life reconstruction. Recognition felt validating, but client success stories remained the most meaningful measure of impact. Speaking fees had increased dramatically, enabling selective engagement with organizations whose missions aligned with my values. Financial independence brought choice in all areas of life. The business had evolved beyond my original vision, encompassing aspects of psychology, finance, and personal development I'd never expected to master. Necessity had revealed hidden capabilities. Meditation had become a daily practice, not from spiritual seeking, but from practical need for mental clarity. Running a growing business while supporting hundreds of clients required exceptional focus. The woman who'd once exhausted herself monitoring Richard's moods now channeled that same attention into positive creation. Energy directed toward growth felt infinitely more satisfying. Sleep came easily now, unmarred by anxiety about hidden secrets or relationship landmines. Authentic living eliminated the hypervigilance that had characterized my marriage years. Plans for a second book were developing, focused on the business principles learned through personal reconstruction. Professional and personal transformation were inseparably linked. The consulting firm's franchise model was attracting investors interested in replicating our success in smaller markets. Systematic approaches to life's construction could be taught and scaled. Universities had approached me about developing curriculum around resilience, authenticity, and entrepreneurship following major life disruptions. Academic partnerships offered exciting possibilities for broader impact. Walking through Central Park on a crisp November evening, I considered the distance traveled since that cancelled flight 5 years earlier. The journey felt both endless and instantaneous. The woman who'd stood bewildered in Orlando Airport couldn't have imagined the life that betrayal would ultimately create. Sometimes destruction was reconstruction's necessary first step. Every difficult day had contributed to this moment of profound gratitude. Not gratitude for Richard's betrayal, but for my response to it. That distinction felt important. The scared, angry woman stranded in Florida had evolved into someone I genuinely admired. The process hadn't been comfortable, but the results exceeded any marriage-era dreams. Success felt earned rather than inherited, authentic rather than performed, sustainable rather than dependent on someone else's choices. This was what genuine security looked like. Looking ahead, possibilities seemed unlimited. No hidden agendas to navigate, no lies to uncover, no energy wasted on relationship maintenance. Freedom was the ultimate luxury.